everyone, my name is Ellie Mae with Artesprix, and today I have a fun little project for you. We are going to be creating our own buttons. Buttons are back. When I'm traveling, I find that this is one of those things I'm seeing as souvenirs that are popping up all over, buttons or pins. So we're going to use the Artesprix Sublimation buttons. They come with a pin back as well, and we are going to use those to create some fun little buttons very, very easily. So the first thing that you're going to need, we're going to go through the supplies real quick. I'm going to be using the Artesprix Sublimation markers. I have my markers standing upright, and you want to put them upright for about 20 minutes before you go to use them. That gets the ink flowing down to the tip so that it will be ready to use. I'm also going to be showing how to use some of the Artesprix ink pads to create a background. Of course, we're going to need the sublimation buttons, and then for the inks, I'm going to be using some blending brushes and Artesprix heat tape, specialized heat tape that does not melt at the high temperatures that sublimation is. We're going to be utilizing some regular ordinary copy paper, a pencil, some scissors, and one of the most important parts is your Artesprix protective siliconized paper. This is going to protect your surface of your heat press or whatever heat source you are using at the high temps, because sublimation is science. And what happens with the sublimation ink is we're going to place the sublimation ink on the copy paper, and then with high heat and pressure, it is going to turn into a gas, and it's going to transfer to our sublimation blank. That also means that your ink transfer can get outside of your blank area, so you want to protect it with your Artesprix protective paper. That is a very important process. And if you get any ink on your top or bottom platen for your heat source, it could transfer to future projects. So you want to make sure to utilize this paper very, very well. I also have the Artesprix heat pad protective surface that's going to protect my surface from these hot blanks when they come out of my heat press. Now for this project, you could use stencils. You could cut little objects, which is what I have here. You could go around your house and you can find hearts, you could find shamrocks, you could find all kinds of things. So next time you are walking around your house or the Dollar Tree or a craft store, look for little objects that you would be able to trace, that you would be able to add into your projects. With that, I think we are ready to get started, and I'm going to show you how easy this process is. So first, let's clear some of this away. I'm going to be using these two shapes for my design. Again, you can use all kinds of different shapes. And then I'm going to take this heat pad and place it off to the side. We'll use that here in just a second. I do have a couple sheets of copy paper. Depending on how much ink you are using or what product, you want to protect your surface as well. If you get any ink on your surface, just make sure to wash it off very, very quickly. Don't let it dry or heat set onto your surface, or it is permanent. Next, I'm going to come in here and we're going to open our buttons. Pencil is a great tool when you are using the sublimation products because it does not transfer. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to double check that there is no protective cover on your sublimation blanks. I'm going to use this as my template, and I'm going to simply trace around it onto my copy paper. I'm going to make several templates, so I'll speed up the video here as I do this. Now with my templates, I have my sizing for my design. The pencil does not transfer to your sublimation blank, so you can feel free to vary your ink or whatever you're using on the outsides of this template, and it's not going to transfer that pencil to your final project. I'm going to go ahead and take my templates, and let's just start with two. It's always a good idea to have extras just in case you don't like your design. It is very basic copy paper, so it's very economical if you just want to start over. So let's work with one of these shapes at a time. The button is 2.5 inches in diameter, so we're going to work with that, and I've worked with that with the shapes that I've cut. Now, again, you can just use shapes, or you can even freehand draw. So let's go ahead and we'll start with this shamrock. And you want to keep in mind that sublimation is mirrored. So if you want it a certain direction, or if you're working with text, you will need to mirror that text I'm simply going to take this and I'm going to trace on it, around it. Now this gives me my basic outline shape. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect because I am using pencil. That shape isn't going to transfer. And actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to spoil this. What I'm going to do with this one is I am going to do a sketch of the shamrock. So it's going to look a little bit not perfect anyhow. For this one, I'm just going to use the basics Artesprix Sublimation markers. I am using a chisel tip and for green and a fine tip for the black. So I'll leave the black there. I'm going to do the outline with the black. On this one, I'm just going to experiment and just go across the entire circle in one direction or another and give it sort of a scribbled look. Now keep in mind that any white areas that you leave are going to be white on the final product of the sublimation blank because that is the white surface. And the more ink you lay down, that is going to alter the color as well. As you can see in this, you also want to keep in mind that the color that you see right now is not going to be the final result. It is going to brighten up as the heat source is applied and as that ink is transferred, and it will be quite a bit different color than it looks right now. So right now in my lighting, it looks blue, but it is actually going to be the green. And then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to take my marker. I am not going for perfection here. I want this to be a sketch sort of design. So then I'm going to sketch around my stenciled area. Okay, and it's as simple as that. So I have my sketched shamrock that is going to go on my button, and allow yourself to just have fun and see what happens. It does not have to be straight lines. It does not have to be perfect. The sketch design is actually coming back and I see it more and more often. So let's go ahead and let's get our second one ready to go. I'm going to grab my template here and I'm going to use this as my template shape. For this one, I'm going to do just a little bit different design for it. I'm going to start with making my background with my yellow ink. And I'm just going to take and rub it across, and you want to start outside. Where you set down your blending brush is going to be the heaviest saturation. So if you start outside, it can help you not have so much concentration in one area on your blank. And blending is great because you can get a variance of colors. Start light because you can always add more ink, but you cannot take ink away. And when you're happy with that, make sure to close the lid. And you want to keep these as dedicated blending brushes for your sublimation inks and not swap them back and forth between regular inks. That will help you in your process too. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to trace around this object so I know where to add my additional colors. And there we have our trace. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I have some lines outside of that area because the pencil does not transfer. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to outline this with the black, and I can add additional colors to that. And once you have your outline, I'm going to come in here with these yellow, green, and purple, and I'm going to fill in this design. Now you could also fill the design in prior to outlining. Sometimes that works better. we're going to see, and hopefully I don't smear any of that black ink. Now, while this color is already, the background's already yellow, I'm adding the yellow on top of it, and it's going to add a little bit more color to that. It'll give it a little bit different shade. We'll see how it turns out. Again, if you're not happy with it, it is just basic copy paper, so you can start over and you are not out very much at all. Now, a couple of things here. One thing you want to keep in mind is I did the whole background in yellow. We're going to see how that turns out. If you do that, keep in mind that you were adding color on top of another color, which could affect the outcome. So this could be a different shade of green than the original marker on it. So if you are doing different background styles, you might want to keep your stencil in place over top of where you are doing your background. So you could do it in a couple different steps. We'll see how this one turns out. The other thing I want to mention is that the chisel markers, if I had to make two choices, I would do the bold markers in the chisel tip and then the fine markers in the basic colors. I like the chisel tip for, you can do wider areas, but you also have this fine point here. As you saw, as I was coloring, I could get into smaller areas. So you have two different options when you're coloring in with those. So those are two things I would say are essential. If you are getting into the sublimation markers, those are what I would recommend because you have some options there for getting into smaller areas as well as wider coloring as well. And we'll just stop fiddling with that and we'll set our markers aside. Now we have our two basic shapes. This is why the protective paper is so important when we go to protect our surface. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to take our buttons. We're going to use this front side and we're going to place that down onto our template. And then we're going to use the Artesprix heat tape to secure that. Now you do want to secure it well, so it's not going to lift or move in transportation from here to the heat press, or while you are pushing the platen down on your heat press. If it is too loose or it does not have a good adhesion, you could get ghosting on your design. So you want to make sure, and in this case, it might actually give it a cool look to have that ghosting, but that's not always desirable for all projects. So make sure to use your heat tape and your protective paper. Now I'm going to grab my protective paper. This is the loudest part of the process. So I'm going to take off a couple pieces and cut those. And once we have our two pieces of protective paper, I am going to make this into a sublimation sandwich, or someone else referred to it as a sublimation taco. So in this case, it's the taco. I'm going to have my sublimation paper. I'm going to place my blank down on the sublimation paper with my design on top. The design is what you want to hit the top platen, which is the hot part of your press. And I'm going to fold over my sublimation paper. Since these are small blanks, I can do both of these at the same time in my heat source. We are going to heat this at 400 degrees, blank side down, print side up, fold your protective paper over. 400 degrees for 75 seconds. So I'm going to set this over into my heat press, and you want to make sure that your protective paper is larger than your template surface. Remember that ink turns into a gas when it's heated with pressure, and it is going to transfer from the paper to the sublimation blank. Any of that ink that gets outside of your blank area, if it's not protected by this protective paper, could transfer to your heat source. I'm going to place the other one over there, and then I'm going to close my press, and 75 seconds later. Now, once the heat press tells me the time is up, I'm going to carefully and slowly release the top platen on there, and I'm going to let that sit for just a second. I do want to point out that my copy paper that was underneath for that second template did get sublimation ink on it. So anything that has ink on it, you do not want to reuse. Now, I could reuse this in a different area if I was doing another template, but your ink could transfer to the next blank. So you want to make sure to discard that. And then I am going to pull back in my Artesprix protective mat. This is going to protect my work surface when I set these blanks onto it, which have been pressed for 400 degrees, which is very, very hot. And depending on the actual material of the blank, metal holds heat longer. So you want to be careful of that too. These are hardboard, so we are okay here. It is still very, very hot, but you can see in this one, you might not be able to see. This is the top, and there is ink transfer here. So you do not want to reuse this piece of protective paper. That ink could transfer to your next blank. So let's go ahead and slide these off, and you can see this one a little bit more. So this was the ink transfer, and this is, you should discard this now. But it does protect your surface, which is the most important part. So here we can see that ink transfer. Pretty neat. And then we have our blank, and you want to be very, very careful removing this. It is still very, very hot. So we'll go ahead and flip that over, and there I have my first sketch button, and we have our second. This one's kind of neat. I'll hold it up by the heat tape. It looks like some of that ink with my purple got mixed in with the greens. It gives it a little bit different look. So all fun to play with. So I'll be excited to wear these buttons on my upcoming trip. Just make sure not to burn yourself. Now we're going to let those sit for just a couple minutes, and we can finish them off. Once they are cooled, you want to make sure that your buttons are the direction you want them. We can go ahead and grab our pin backs and just make sure that you decide which way you want your pin back on the back of your button, and that your button is the direction that you want it and you're not placing it on upside down. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip this one over. My pin back opens down. Peel the 3M backing paper off and position your pin back on your button as centered as possible. And I find it's best if you do it towards the top. If you get it too low on your button, that means your button can flop over when it's being worn. We'll do the same thing with this second one. Verify my pin direction, peel off the backing cover, and then place it on top. Now we have a couple buttons that we can wear out or pass out as souvenirs too. You can make these for a girls' night out, for a friends group, craft night, all kinds of different ideas that are super fun for playing with buttons that are coming back. If you have any questions, please let us know in the comments below. Links are in the description for all of the supplies, and make sure to check out the Artesprix social media channels as well as the Artesprix blog, where there is lots of inspiration for different projects and different techniques. Thanks for joining, and have a great day.